Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Foner, and I work in the Office of Alumni Relations at Northeastern. I work on our affinity and domestic engagement team, and I bring unique programs just like this one to the wider Northeastern community. I'm so excited for you all to join us today. This is a very special event, as so many of us have had travel plans altered over the past year. Having the opportunity to escape for an hour is really wonderful, and we have a great host for us today. So first, just a couple housekeeping items. It would be really helpful if everyone could stay muted just to ensure that we have a good sound quality. As I said, we're recording this, so staying on mute will be really helpful. At the end of each of these sections, we are going to take a pause for questions. So as you have questions throughout the entire program, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring it and reading the questions out loud. So as soon as something pops into your head, or if you need some clarity, go ahead and put it in the chat box. We're going to be interspersing the entire presentation with questions, so don't be shy. And then lastly, I will be monitoring the chat box through the event in general. So if you're having any issues or have any questions not related to the event, you can go ahead and send me a message or post anything there. I'll be keeping an eye on it. So now I would like to turn the floor over to our host today, Anna Kubler, and she is going to tell her own story and introduce herself.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. So my name is Anna, and we'll just hop over here to my introduction. There we go. So I am currently a CPS student studying public and media relations. I actually did my undergrad at UMass, so I am from Massachusetts a little bit. I know the area well. My husband went to BU, but I moved to Hawaii 3 years ago. I can't believe it's already been 3 years. Some of you were here just a few minutes ago, or if you're just joining, I just said my husband's in the Army. So we are expecting to move soon, very unfortunately. This is actually the longest I've ever lived anywhere. My dad was in the Navy, so this is as close as I'm gonna get to a hometown for me, it feels like. So I'm so excited to be able to share all of this with you. Currently, I'm a program and volunteer coordinator with USO. It's a local nonprofit. We serve military and their families. So I'm actually located at the airport. So if you do have any questions specifically related to travel, we do still have a quarantine here in place unless you test negative. Feel free to add that into the chat too, because those logistics are a part of getting out here to the islands. One of the fun facts that I actually wanted to share is we are located 2,000 miles away from the mainland. Mainland's what, many of you have been out here before, so that's what we call the rest of the United States. But we are technically the most isolated inhabited islands in the world. So logistically, it's hard to get out here sometimes, especially if you're coming from the East Coast. So I'm here to answer all of those questions too, not just the fun stuff. I'm here for all of it. So that's enough about me. Just a quick little introduction to Hawaii in general. I see many of you have already been here before, and that makes me so happy. But just in case you didn't know, I'm going to go ahead and cover this kind of stuff anyways. Technically, Hawaii is made up of 137 volcanic islands. Only 8 of those are actually inhabited and you can travel to, but there's really the 4 main ones that you are probably going to be visiting. And I see a couple of you have definitely visited most of those. So that's the big island, also called Hawaii Island, what the state is named after. Oahu is the one I'm on. It's the most populated, with Honolulu, the capital, located here, Kauai and Maui. So those are all wonderful islands. Today we're going to be focusing on Oahu, which is where I live. And just a little overview of Oahu itself. When I talk about Oahu, I'm talking about 4 or 5 different parts of the island you'll hear me referencing. So the west side, the east side, that's pretty standard. I feel like you kind of get where that is. The North Shore, and then we don't really say the South Shore that frequently, because most of the South Shore is comprised of Honolulu and Waikiki. So I'll mainly be referencing Honolulu and Waikiki. I live in the middle of the island to a point where it's basically, they call it the North Shore. So a lot of the things you'll see here, a lot of the things I do weekly are all going to be on the North Shore, which is my favorite part of the island. I'm a little bit biased, so hopefully I can share a little bit, like Stephanie said, a new point of view for you guys today. All right. Let's get started. All right, so we're gonna start with hikes. I love hiking out here. It is such a unique experience, especially coming from New England. Um, the hikes are straight up unless it's a botanical garden and it's a trail. So it can be a little difficult sometimes, but a lot of them are super short too, and you can get amazing views on just a short hike. So we're actually going to start with one of the hikes closest to me up here on the North Shore, Kealia Trail. It's behind an airfield, so it can be pretty cool sometimes when the planes are taking off and coming, but you get great ocean views. So we're going to go ahead and click on that there. So this is Kealia Trail. So like I said, it's located on the North Shore, but it's a little far. If many of you have been to Oahu before, like I see here, it's a little far from Haleiwa. It's in the opposite direction, closer to the west side. But it's beautiful views if you can't see here. There are, like I said, behind an airfield. So there's actually a few abandoned planes, which makes for some cool pictures. And then pillboxes. If you've been to Oahu before, you've probably done at least the Lanikai pillbox hike. These are some of the most popular hikes on the island. So pillbox, what is that? The pillboxes are basically just old bunkers from World War II when the military used Hawaii as their home place for the Pacific theater. So they're scattered all across the island. Not all of them you can still get to. Some of them are restricted, but there's pillboxes on the North Shore. West side is where the Miley pillbox is. Those are also called the pink pillboxes. And then the Lanikai pillbox is probably the most popular hike on the island. That doesn't mean I still don't love it. I've done it many times. It's super quick, about 20 minutes. There's not a lot of shade, so you definitely want to go in the morning or in the evening. But it's really fun. If you can see on these pictures, it kind of looks like I'm sitting on concrete. That's because I am sitting on the pillboxes themselves. And what people, locals have done in the past, they've graffitied these pillboxes in a beautiful way. So each one has their own unique art. So it's really worth it to go to more than one pillbox. They're beautiful and you can't beat these views. Like I said, the Miley pillbox, that's the one down at the bottom with the sunset. Stunning, stunning view of the west side. And then the Lanikai pillbox is the one with me and my friends from a few years ago. I can't believe it's already been a few years at this point. But that one is probably the most common view you'll see. If you Google hiking on Oahu, I guarantee you'll see that view. But you can't beat it. Kayaking Falls, I wanted to at least include one waterfall in here. There are many waterfalls on the island, but this one is the easiest hike. So I thought it would be great to include this one just in case, I know we're not all avid hikers, but this one takes about 20 minutes through dense woods and jungle. You have to park at a golf course, and I will caveat this one saying they are charging for parking now. That's just something because of COVID they started doing to increase funds for the parking lot itself since it's maintained. A lot of the safer and easier waterfalls you do have to pay to go to. Manila Falls is a very popular one. There's one on the North Shore at Waimea Botanical Gardens. I personally just like this one because it's definitely more of a wooded trail. It is popular, but if you go early enough, you could be the only one there. Move on. Coolio Ridge. This is probably the hardest hike that I've included here. It's 4 miles up and 4 miles back. So if you're up for that, it does take a full morning to do. I definitely recommend starting this hike at 7 a.m. Right at the break of dawn, because it does take a second to get up there and it does get a little crowded sometimes. But it is worth those views. So that view is from the top there, that picture on the left. You are going to want to spend at least 30 minutes just sitting on the top of that mountain. The trail itself is really well maintained. So even though it's long, it starts with some switchbacks. So just going back and forth up the side of the mountain until you get about halfway up. So about at that 2-mile mark, you enter what feels like a regular forest. You're surrounded by pine trees. It's the craziest thing to go from jungle to forest, and then you hit the top of the mountain and there's no more trees. You climb the altitude really quickly. So it's really fun to see. A lot of the hikes on Oahu, because they are so steep, have these stairs like you see here on the right. And it makes it a little bit easier to climb up. I know, especially for me, when I start to see those stairs, I'm like, okay, good, cool. I don't have to be hanging onto a rope or anything, which you do on a few hikes out here. But like I said, I tried to include easy in quotation marks ones for these ones, nothing that are too dangerous at all. Like this one, for example. So Keanu Point is actually back up on the North Shore, just past Kealia Trail, the first hike that we covered. And this is one of the few hikes that I wanted to include that is, in Hawaii terms, flat. You still are going through a trail, so it's a little bit bumpy and rocky, but you're not gaining any altitude while you're going through this hike. So this is actually a state park out here and a wild bird reserve. So no dogs allowed. If for some reason you already live here, if you have a pet, you are not allowed to bring your pet on this hike to protect the birds. But it's a great place to view native birds, monk seals in the winter time come up to the island here quite frequently, and turtles too. That is one thing I'll say while I'm here. You can see turtles anywhere on this island. Don't get tricked into thinking you can only see turtles at certain beaches by any sort of marketing. You can see turtles anywhere as long as you get in the water or keeping your eye out. Turtles are all over this island. That's one of the best parts. My husband and I do a lot of snorkeling, and we've been head to head with a lot of turtles, and you want to make sure you keep your distance so you know they're okay, they don't get too freaked out. But I just recommend keeping your eye out and getting in the water for some turtles. But this is Keanu Point. I really enjoy it. It is about 3 miles out to the actual point, which is the most northern point of the island, and then 3 miles back. And it is in direct sunlight. So this is another one you really want to do early, bring sunscreen and all that good stuff. Okay, I think this is my last one. This is another super popular hike, Makapu'u Lighthouse. There are also tide pools at the bottom of this light that are super popular, lighthouse, sorry, excuse me, that are super popular for swimming. So it's kind of fun to make a day out of Makapu'u. So you can climb up, see the lighthouse, climb back down, and then get into the tide pools. Super fun. This trail is the only one that I put on here that's paved. So another one that's a little bit easier. If you're walking at a pretty decent pace, it takes about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on your pace, to get up and down. So it's another one that's not too long, and you get these amazing views. This one is more popular, so you do want to get there early. The gates, I believe, open at 7, and it's a small parking lot. So don't be surprised if you have to park on the side of the road. We all do it, but just be careful with, you know, the local traffic going through there. If you are coming here soon, which I do see some of you are, this is a good one because it's so popular. Just to say, we do still have a mask mandate here in Hawaii. So just make sure you're bringing masks you're comfortable hiking in and wearing out in public. It is getting hotter here. I was telling Stephanie yesterday, actually, she was joking about asking people if the spring has sprung. We do have seasons here in Hawaii, ever so slightly, only if you've lived here for a while. And we're just coming out of our rainy season, which is our winter season. So the sun is out. I'm sure you can see every time I move my hands, it gets a little bright. The sun is out. We are officially coming close to summer, but that also means the temperatures are getting closer to 85 to 90 degrees nearly every day. So you just want to keep that in mind. We still do have a nice cool breeze that helps temper it sometimes, but if you're in that direct sunlight, it gets warm for sure.
We do have a question, Anna.
Yes.
before diving into activities.
Yes.
So for hikes that you recommend to do at sunset,
Mhm.
do you bring flashlights or do you recommend starting a little bit earlier so you're not up there quite so dark? What are your recommendations?
So definitely the latter. I haven't yet had to bring any sort of headlamp or flashlights or anything like that. If you want to get started earlier or want to leave later because of crowds, I would definitely recommend a headlamp. It's a little bit rocky. You know, you want to make sure you're placing your feet at the right spot so you're not slipping. Um, but when I've done sunrise or sunset, I typically wait until it's at least dawn so there's some sort of light and you can see mostly what you're doing. Or at sunset, I just leave right after sunset. You know, you sit there for 5 minutes, go, wow, that's pretty. And then I start heading back down just so I can avoid hiking in the dark. But a fun fact about Hawaii that I wanted to include in the section too, something you don't have to worry about, there are no snakes on the island. So that headlamp is purely so you can see where you're placing your feet. You're not trying to look out for any sort of snakes or venomous creatures. We have mongoose, which kind of look like furry snakes if you're not looking close, but they're not going to come near you.
That's it for now.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right. So we are moving on to activities. This was kind of my catch-all for a few things that I really wanted to make sure you guys knew about, but didn't really fit into beaches or hikes or anything like that. So we're going to start with one of the things I feel is most important for everyone coming to Oahu, specifically Iolani Palace. So for those of you who may not know, Hawaii was actually a recognized, internationally recognized nation before the United States came in. So they had their own royal family. This is their royal palace, their place of residence. And a really cool thing about Iolani Palace that just kind of goes to show you how established this nation was before the United States stepped in. Iolani Palace actually had electricity and plumbing, running water before the White House did. Just a little fun fact. So they were internationally recognized, I keep saying that, by France and England specifically, so some of those superpowers. And that's just something too, you just want to keep in mind when you're here on our islands. There are people who still push for Hawaii sovereignty. So you just want to be respectful of the local culture and traditions. And like I said, right now, like we still have those masks mandates. Please wear your masks while you're out here. That keeps us safe and you guys safe, even if you've been vaccinated. But yeah, Iolani Palace, you'll learn a lot of great history here about the Hawaii Kingdom, which lasted from, I believe, 1810 to 1893. So about 80 years. Before that, each island had its own kingdom and chiefdom, but they were united in 1810 to form Hawaii Kingdom. So just a little background behind Iolani Palace. At Iolani Palace too, you'll see a lot of references to the last queen, Queen Liliuokalani, some of her old dresses, where she was held captive in her own palace, and some of those other facts. So highly recommend going to Iolani Palace. It does cost a small fee to go there, but you are paying for the upkeep of this historical landmark, and it's really important that it stays there. So that's Iolani Palace. And then the next one, following on this trend of Hawaiian history and Hawaiian culture, is the Bishop Museum. This place is a treasure trove of Hawaiian history and culture, starting at the very first time that the Polynesians settled these islands. So it's really interesting. This shot here to the left is one of the main galleries. So you start at the bottom and it goes from the beginning of folklore, what the Hawaiian folklore tells us, how Hawaii started, how the culture was back then, and then you travel up to more modern history. And so the top floor is more about the Hawaii Kingdom, more specifically about each royal family that occupied the throne. It's incredibly interesting. You will spend at least 3 hours here. You will get lost in the information. It's super fascinating. And then they have a few other things. I think currently they have a surf exhibit, which is really exciting. So it goes to the history of surf in Hawaii. It was invented here. So it's obviously very prevalent. And yeah, again, I can't recommend, I almost recommend making a day of both of these. They're not too far from each other. They're both in Honolulu, maybe about 25 minutes apart. So you will need a car or the bus. Our bus does have an app as well, if that makes you nervous. But our bus system does work very, very great. It gets you anywhere on island. But maybe going to Iolani Palace first or the Bishop Museum first, and then going to the next place gives you a full day of Hawaiian culture and history and just gives you that appreciation more for the islands, and informs your visit a little bit better too. I'm super you can feel free to ask me any questions about Hawaiian history and I'll get you some answers. So my third thing, this might not be for everyone, but my husband and I, like I've said before, we love snorkeling. We just love being in the water. So I highly recommend shark diving, unless it specifically says on the website that you are doing an open cage dive. You'll be in a cage. It's really safe. I highly recommend doing it more so in this summer, which our summer months are about May to, I'd say, as far as like late September or late October even, because most of the shark diving tours that you're going to be doing are on the North Shore. So during the winter months, the North Shore swell picks up greatly. That's where all the awesome surf competitions are out of. But that means if you're going to be jumping into a cave with some sharks, you're going to be rattling around a little bit if it's in the winter. So in the summer, it's extremely calm. I've never felt any sort of danger being in a cage, and I've done it twice. The shark, we're not a main food in a shark's diet. So they're just there to check us out and be like, okay, cool, there's something in the water, and then they move along. But it's really fascinating to see. There's such cool creatures, and it's such a uniquely Hawaii experience. This summer, my husband and I are going to do our first cage-free dive, so I'll definitely keep you guys updated on that. I'm super excited. But definitely recommend shark diving. There are some native tours too, so you make sure you're paying your money to the people who've grown up here, whose families are from here, and it's just a great experience all around. You get to learn about the sharks, the water, and the local culture. So next thing is kayaking. You can do this on a few places around the island, but the two most popular places are Lanikai. So that's kind of where I showed you earlier. I showed you the view from the top of the mountain, and now I'm showing you the ocean view. Paddling out to those two, they're called mokes. They're two little islands out there, or on the North Shore, going out to another small island like this called Chinaman's Hat. So there are kayak rentals at each location. I'm going to specifically talk a little bit more about kayaking out to the mokes off of Lanikai. So getting out there is super easy. You are going over some reefs, so you just kind of have to be careful about where you're putting your kayak. And the kayak rental locations are really great at telling you where to kayak to avoid currents. And then once you get out there, there's only one island that you can actually land on. And it is a little bit tricky, so I only do recommend that for experienced kayakers. Basically, the waves are coming from the back of the island forward. So when they come forward, they're crashing together in front of the island. Like I said, in the summer months, the waves aren't too bad. So it was a little bit easier in the summer. But if you're doing it in the winter, like we did, which might have not been the smartest choice, you get the waves coming together and you might, land separately from your kayak on the islands. It's not too bad, but I definitely recommend doing it in the summer, or if you're more experienced, you might have a better chance of landing that than my husband and I did. But it's super great out there. Monk seals and turtles also land on those islands. So it's another great opportunity to see some wildlife. As you're swimming out there, Lanikai is so clear. You can see fish underneath of you as you're swimming. So you might even be tempted to bring some snorkel gear with you if you're kayaking out there, so you can just jump out and look at some of the fish while you're paddling out there. Okay, another activity that is near and dear to my heart is Kuebler Ranch. So this is actually where a lot of the films are a lot of the movies are filmed out here on Oahu. So Jurassic Park, Jumanji, the newer one, 50 First Dates. Any movie based on Oahu or in Hawaii has probably had at least one scene filmed at Kuebler Ranch. It's very exciting. They have a lot of tours. So you'll see here, I highlighted 2 tours. They do horseback riding tours of the grounds, and they do ATV tours of the grounds too. I can't tell you which one I enjoyed more, to be honest. So they were both 2 hours. I love horseback riding. I'm not a horseback rider, so it's always exciting for me when I do get to go on a tour on horseback. But the ATV is just kind of fun too, because you're, hitting the mud piles, going your little 15 miles an hour that you're allowed to. It's a little bit fun, and they do take you to different locations. So they are tour led. So the tour guide fills you in. They'll stop you at certain locations, tell you about movies that were filmed there or why this place is historically and culturally significant. So I highly recommend any tour that you can get. I know they do movie tours, they do catamaran tours. Any tour you can get at Kuebler Ranch is absolutely worth it. I've had a blast every single time. Okay, so that was it for activities. What are we looking at for questions?
Of course, I clicked like one thing on my screen and everything.
Oh, you're good?
Everything went crazy. So firstly, are the palace and the museum open during COVID times?
Yes, they are both open. So like I said before, we do just ask that you wear your masks. I don't think you'll even be allowed in those buildings if you don't have a mask. And they do have capacity limits. So you will have to book your time to go to both the museum and the palace beforehand. The museum, if you're doing it during a weekday, I don't think tourism is back up high enough yet that you can't just walk up, but they will have a specific time frame that you're allowed to go into the museum.
And then interest about shark diving. First of all, how much does it generally cost?
So generally, so the first time I went, I believe I paid about $90, and then the second time was about $120. You're not going to pay more than $120, I don't think, unless you're paying for a video, pictures, all of those sorts of things.
And then you're in a cage, but are you scuba diving? How are you underwater?
So you're actually just snorkeling. So they have the cage kind of just floating in the water, and you can either bring your own, like my husband and I do, or they provide you with snorkel masks. So it's just the tube and your goggles, and you just put yourself under while you're holding on to the cage. So the water's just right here. So like that's kind of what I was talking about. You don't really feel too much in danger because you're really just right at the water, and the boat's right next to you. So you're just kind of looking at the sharks. They're looking at you. You're hanging out together.
Great. All set.
Perfect. All right, then we get to move on to another one of my favorites that it deserved its own category, coffee shops. So if you didn't know, Hawaii is the only state in the US that grows its own coffee. So we have some coffee farms here. There's coffee farms here just about on every island, but here in the Big Island are 2 of the most popular coffee farms. The Big Island, if you've heard of like Kona coffee or stuff like that, that's where a lot of the great coffee comes from. But we do have our own coffee farms here on Oahu, and one of those is Green World, pictured there at the bottom left of your screen, Green World Farms. They do have a small part of their coffee farms that you can just walk through without any sort of tour, like specific tour. They do provide tours of their facility as well, or you can just pop in for some coffee, and they have a light amount of pastries and things like that. And it is the only stop with public bathrooms. If you're coming from Honolulu, Waikiki area up to the North Shore, it's one of the few stops with public bathrooms you'll get. So most likely if you're taking a guided tour, they'll probably stop you here anyways, just for that fact alone. But my husband and I go here, I'm not exaggerating, every single week. It's our favorite place to get coffee on island. I take everyone here to try the coffee since they grow it themselves. It's really cool. And it's a great place to pick up souvenirs too. They have an awesome shop. And then other one over here is Morning Brew. So this is down in Honolulu. There are so many great coffee shops actually downtown in Honolulu. This one specifically is a neighborhood called Kaka'ako. It's really fun. There's a lot of cute shops and a lot of local eateries. But this one specifically has a great breakfast menu. One of the bigger breakfast menus I've seen out of a coffee shop. So if you're looking for a fun stop, definitely recommend Morning Brew, and you really can't beat their cold brew. And then I have one more coffee shop for you. And that is Surfers Coffee. So this is technically also located on the North Shore. Like I said at the beginning, I'm a little North Shore biased. But this coffee shop is located in Wahiawa, and true to its name, it is covered in pictures of surfers. They have, my favorite thing on the menu is actually not their coffee, even though it's spectacular. They have Mochi Waffles, which is a pretty unique Hawaii thing that I've seen out here. So if you've never had mochi before, it's made out of rice flour, so it's a little sticky. And it has a sweet crunch on the outside, and they cover it in honey and powdered sugar, and it is just the most mouthwatering thing. I have to bring people out here to try the Mochi Waffles, and then I always they have coconut lattes, so it's a perfect little Hawaii coffee shop. You're covered around with pictures of people surfing, your coconut latte and your Mochi Waffle, and it's just a great way to start your morning. Any questions about coffee? I know I went through that one fast. I love coffee, but can only talk about it so much. Okay, cool. So we'll move on then to beaches, what everyone comes to Hawaii for. You know, beaches are obviously all around the island, so it was really, really difficult for me just to pick 5. So I picked 5 that I frequent, my husband frequents, and these, you know, you see Lanikai again. If you can't tell, I really love Lanikai. It's just great over there. Again, that's on the east side of the island. But these are just some of my favorite beaches. So they might not be the most popular, but they are my favorites. So Mokalea Beach Park, this is over by Keanu Point and Kealia Trail. So it's still up in that same corner. You can see here on this map. It's in the opposite direction of Haleiwa. I live here in the middle of the island where it says Schofield Barracks. So it takes us about 20 minutes just to give you some reference for this map to get up to Mokalea Beach Park. This park is not visited as much by tourists, so it can be fairly empty. On the weekends, locals, military host like barbecues out there, not so much now because of COVID, but it can get a little bit crowded in the morning. It's also a popular fishing spot. Some parts of the island or some parts of the beach can be a little bit rocky, but there's a few coves that are just flat bottom sand all the way out. And you really can't beat it. And like I said a few times now, in the summer, it's completely flat. So it's just the most wonderful to just lay out in that water, floating around, not a care in the world besides that beach that you're on. It's great. Here's a few pictures, Mokalea. Oops, I accidentally clicked on the chat box, got out of my. Perfect. And we're back to Lanikai again. But now you can see on the map where you are on the island when you're going over to Lanikai. So if you can't tell, I definitely recommend making a day of going out there. There's some great places to eat between Lanikai and Kailua. You'll see Lanikai again on when I go and cover restaurants and food trucks. So if you hike in the morning, spend your day at the beach, go get some poke, come back to the beach. It's going to be a wonderful day. So a fun adventure-filled day. So if you can see there, it's closer to Honolulu. It'll probably take you about 35 minutes to get out there, especially coming down from in Waikiki. But it's absolutely worth it. I highly recommend you make a day of going to Lanikai if you're going to be visiting here. So another one of our beloved beaches is Sharks Cove up on the North Shore. There's a few beaches that are kind of right next to each other, so I chose Sharks Cove because it is one of the better known, but there's a beach right next to it called Three Tables or Three Sisters, depending on the translation that you get. But this is the best beach for us for snorkeling. So again, it's on the North Shore, as you can see on the map. From our house on the middle of the island, it probably takes, with some of the, morning traffic, it takes about 45 minutes to get up there. Sometimes 30 if there's no one in our way driving up there. But this is a great place for snorkeling. So you can go scuba diving off of here. I have seen tours go scuba diving, but you can see just as many fish snorkeling at the surface. Shark's Cove is quite literally cove, but unlike its name, I've never seen a shark in Shark's Cove. So I've seen plenty of turtles and some really big parrotfish. So they kind of look like rainbow fish. They're really cool to see. And I highly recommend, if you are interested in snorkeling, they do also have tide pools, so you don't have to be out in the open water. You can hop on over to the tide pools and just kind of stick your face in, or just watch the fish from the surface. So there's really a little bit for everyone up in that area, and it's a great place, again, to see some wildlife. So White Plains Beach. This beach is down on the South Shore. It's a very popular beach for people to go surfing, especially for beginners. So Waikiki itself is a great place to learn how to surf too, but if you're just looking for something a little bit different, especially I heard, we have some military here. For military, they do rentals and a few other things, but a lot of locals use this beach to go surfing too. That's my husband. I work on Sundays, so that's my husband's Sunday, is going out down to White Plains and surfing for a few hours. It really burns you out. It's a great way to kill some energy if you're feeling a little like you have a little extra that day. Paddling through the waves and getting out to a good set is definitely can be a little exhausting. I only go as far myself as paddling. I have yet to actually get up on a wave, but I have zero coordination. My husband gets up on a wave almost every time. So I have full faith, if you're interested in surfing, that you can definitely try to do that. And then let's see here. All right, and then Sunset Beach. Again, like I said, I am North Shore biased, so this is another beach on the North Shore. We go here whether it's winter or summer. If the waves are big, this is where they have a lot of the really popular surfing competitions. If there's no waves in the summer, it is crystal clear, flat, just a beautiful place to go swimming. You can also do some snorkeling up here too, but it's all around a nice beach, and it's a really big beach too, so you can separate yourself from people and have a little bit more privacy. It's one of the most stunning beaches on the island, and if you can't see here, it goes pretty far too, so there's a place for everyone. One thing I don't think they tell you, and I don't have a picture here, but Waikiki is a pretty skinny beach, so you're kind of up on top of each other down on Waikiki Beach, so that's why you don't see any beaches really in Honolulu on my list. We like a little bit more space, so we like to really hang out up here on the North Shore for the most amount of space. Okay, I think this is the last one. Any questions for beaches?
Question about parking. Is it generally crowded? Do you need to go early? And is it charged parking, or is there free available parking?
So I'll start with that last question first, actually. So a fun thing about beaches in Hawaii, all beaches must be public beaches in Hawaii. So you do not have to pay for parking. That is a law. You might sometimes pay for parking out of convenience, not because there's not free parking, because it's already filled up and you're left to pay for parking, but there will always be free parking at some point in the day. That being said, it really depends on the beach as to when parking fills up. So a lot of those beaches on the North Shore that I talked about, Mokalea and Sunset Beach, have ample parking. I've never had any trouble finding parking any day of the week, any time of the day. There's easy roadside parking, or there's parking in actual parking lots. The only one that can be a little bit tricky sometimes is Shark's Cove. They have one long strip of parking that does fill up early, so if you're wanting to go to Shark's Cove, I highly recommend that you get there in the morning. Same with Lanikai and Kailua, they're kind of connected. There is public parking, but it fills up extremely fast. So if you want to make a day out of Lanikai, I highly suggest parking at the beach, walking up to the Lanikai pillboxes, and leaving your car down at the beach so you can claim your parking spot. Those are two really popular areas. So it really just depends on where you're going, but most of the time I just say get there early just in case.
And then Tina, just nod if I'm getting your question right. So the question is, what time do buses start? Does that mean like public transit? Yeah.
Yeah, so buses, I believe they start at 5 a.m. if I'm not mistaken. If not, they'd start closer to 6, but it's in that 5 to 6 window. I actually lived in Honolulu in college for 6 months. So I only took the bus, and I would take the bus all the way up for the North Shore, which does take time. If you're going to the North Shore from Honolulu by public transit, it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending where on the North Shore.
And then is it common for beaches to have facilities, so bathrooms, changing rooms, potentially
Yes.
bathrooms?
So most of the beaches that I'm trying to go through all the beaches now. I'll actually go back here just see. So Sunset Beach has bathrooms. White Plains Beach has bathrooms. Sharks Cove has bathrooms. Lanikai Beach. So Lanikai Beach itself doesn't, but if you go just like a quarter mile down the road to Kailua Beach, they have bathrooms. The only one that doesn't on my list is Mokalea. So most beaches are going to have some form of bathrooms, and they'll actually be standing bathrooms, not just like porta potties or something like that. So you can change in there, and they have running water to wash your hands and things like that. So you'll be all set for bathrooms.
And then question on traffic in general. Is the time estimates based on like rush hour traffic, or how big of an impact does rush hour have on the traffic patterns?
Rush hour, depending on where you're coming from, has a really big impact. So, you know, I love this island. We are in paradise, but people live here and they commute to work. And if you're coming from anywhere, I'm glad I went back to this slide so you can see the island map a little bit more. So if you're on the south side on H1, that's that highway that goes along the bottom of the island. You are going to be in traffic from about 6 a.m. to 7:38 a.m. And then again, traffic starts early here. That was weird for me. I moved here from DC. Traffic starts at about 2:30 or 3 and then ends at about 6:30. So, and it blocks up. Normally I come from the airport. You see the little airport guy over here, down at the south side, and then I go up to Mililani. Without traffic, that takes me, I saw some cheers for Mililani. Were you from Mililani? I have to ask.
No, my friend's aunt lives in Mililani. Her husband was military, and when I went there to visit, I stayed there for a week and I loved it.
Awesome. Yeah, I really love living here. But normally from the airport to Mililani without traffic is like 20 minutes. With traffic, it has taken me an hour and 15 minutes. So that traffic on H1 is no joke. I highly recommend avoiding it at all costs during rush hour if you can. So if you're staying in Honolulu for the day, stay in Honolulu for the day. If you're somewhere else, if you're coming from the North Shore back down, it's not as bad until you get into Honolulu. Then there's a lot of merges and just a lot of people trying to get to a lot of different areas, so it can get pretty backed up.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Right. Here we go. Food trucks and restaurants. This is another one. I never get tired of the food out here. So this was, I have it actually at 6, or no, it's at 5, but I could have included 20. So I try to include things that my husband and I frequent instead of what's most popular, and places that I try and take people when they come and visit me. So as I said before, I have another Lanikai stop here, the Lanikai Brewing Company. They used to not do food, but because of COVID, they have actually started doing food. So they're doing pizzas and a few appetizers. but it's all island inspired brews. So they have their own brewery, I think, behind the restaurant itself. So it's all just really great as citrusy stuff, some heavier things. I personally like their guava cider, and they have a pineapple cider too. So like I said, super island inspired. It's really fun just to spend the afternoon here, order a pizza, great place to stop after the beach. That is one thing I'll say too. You're in Hawaii, the dressiest you're gonna get is some khaki shorts and flip-flops. We wear flip-flops to weddings. So don't feel like you're coming from the beach, you feel a little bit grimy. Oh, maybe I need to clean up before I go somewhere. It's no big deal. I go everywhere with my, t-shirt, a little wet in places from my bathing suit, my shorts and flip-flops, hair all sandy and up in a bun, and I fit in with everyone else. So that's just something to know. Never feel pressure like, you have to be a little bit more presentable to go to some places. It's flip-flops year round for every occasion here. Okay, next one is Pokestop. So a few of these, if you're a foodie like my husband and I, are actually on the dine and drive-throughs and dives list, like by Guy Fieri. So that's how we found some of these places, and they've become our staples. Pokestop is just down the street from us, and we go there. Again, it's one of those places we go there once a week. Poke is a local favorite, so you'll see it in a lot of places. And if you can't make it to Pokestop, Foodland is actually, so one of our local grocery stores, Foodland, they have their own poke bar in the grocery store, and it's just as good as some of the best restaurants. So if you're going to a beach and you want like a midday picnic on the beach or something, just stop in the nearest Foodland, grab yourself some poke, and head to the beach. That's one of our favorite ways to spend a day. So nothing wrong with that, but I highly recommend Pokestop. Besides just their incredible poke, which, by the way, if you have not been here before, is raw fish, different kinds depending on what kind of poke, but typically tuna, and rice, and just a few other toppings. The most true to form poke is just poke in a seasoning. So the fresh tuna in a seasoning, a sauce, and rice. You can add more things to it, but that's the most true to form style of poke. When I go to the mainland, I know poke is becoming a little bit more popular on the mainland. They tend to do different things with it. So I wanted to just clue you guys in into how we do it out here in the islands. Another place that we frequent, and I always take people to, a little, out there, you don't come to Hawaii expecting to get tacos, I don't think. But Hawaii North Shore Tacos is one of my absolute favorite food trucks. It's located on the North Shore, just across the street from Sharks Cove. So it's pretty fun. There's actually a few food trucks right near it. So you have your options in case tacos aren't your thing, but I always get the shrimp quesadilla here. It does not disappoint. And it's great to refuel after a morning of snorkeling before you go on to your next stop. So highly recommend those food trucks. Like I said, they're right across the street from Sharks Cove. So you can leave your car over at the beach and just pop on over. They do have parking for these few food trucks over here as well, or you can park your car over there. So highly recommend. Oops, I keep clicking out into the chat box. Next one is Highway Inn. So they actually have a few locations, but I really wanted to locate Highway Inn for their local plate lunches. So you can get plate lunches at quite a few places, but this place does super local plate lunches. A lot of other places just do like your garlic shrimp and rice, which is one of my favorites. But here you can get your Kailua pork, your poi, and a few other things that are local. So you'll see these purple sweet potatoes there. We get those at the farmer's market here, and that's one of those unique Hawaii things. The poi is the purple looking sauce in the middle. It's not my favorite, but you should try it if you're in Hawaii. It's a local thing. And then the Kailua pork is over on the left. So definitely recommend Highway Inn if you're really looking to get some of that traditional Hawaiian food, which is hard to say traditional Hawaiian food because it's really a blend of island style, of some Asian influences, and oh my goodness gracious, right in the last one, but it's a blend of a lot of different cultures. But this is the most traditional Hawaiian food that you're gonna get. Highway Inn. Okay. Sunrise Shack. So you can't come to Hawaii without getting an acai bowl. Sunrise Shack is one of my favorite places to get different kinds of smoothie bowls. They do coffee and a few other things like avocado toast, but you cannot beat their smoothie bowls. They have the traditional acai bowl. They have this one over here on the right is my favorite, called Blue Dream. They're delicious. This one's located just across the street from Sunset Beach. So we got sunset and sunrise right there. So we really like to go to Sunrise Shack and then take our bowls back over to the beach. They do have a really cool seating area. And it is truly just this little shack on the side of the road. So this place doesn't really have parking besides street parking. So typically what we would do when we're coming here is drive down to Sunset, park in their parking, and then there's just a little bridge you have to walk across. It's even less than a quarter of a mile. We go get our bowls from Sunrise Shack, and then we head back over to the beach, watch surfers, or just hang out. It's a really great way to spend the afternoon or start your morning. They do open at like 6:30 in the morning or 7. And they don't close until about 4. So you can catch them most times during the day while you're out. Okay, and that's it for food trucks and restaurants. Any questions? There are so many. So there's absolutely places I did not cover. This island is a treasure trove. I know most people only come out here for a week. I'm here for 3 years, and there's still things I haven't done, still things I want to do 5 more times. You can always find adventure on the island of Oahu.
So this is also a time, if anyone just has any questions in general, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I see we have one in there, but I received one earlier to start with.
Mm-hmm.
If people are island hopping and only have 3 days or 4 days on Oahu, it sounds like maybe the best course of action is to break up the island and do days in different places. Like, what are your recommendations for handling that situation?
Absolutely. Just what you said, because of the traffic sometimes, and because of just how far away things can be from each other, I do recommend breaking up the island into certain locations. So like I said a few times, I highly recommend doing Lanikai in a day. A lot of people go up to the North Shore and spend the whole day up there too. That's another place, obviously I had a lot of things to tag up on the North Shore. And then spending just, if you're in Honolulu is fun. I know I didn't cover a lot of places in Honolulu because I feel like they're easier to, if you Google what to do on Oahu, it's going to be a lot of things down in that area. So spending a day just down in Honolulu too, that's probably the top 3. If you have just 3 days on Oahu that I would do, Honolulu, Lanikai, and then the North Shore. And then if you're going all the way up to the North Shore, if you're coming from Honolulu, which I know a lot of people do, going up through the middle of the island to get up there, and then coming back down the east side. So you get to see a lot of those beaches on the east side, and maybe pop over if you'd like to. So that's a great way to cover more land and more of the island too.
Do you have any recommendations for other islands?
Yeah, so I've been to Kauai, Maui, and the Big Island. The other 2 islands that you can travel to are Molokai and Lanai, and I just haven't made it out there yet. They're much smaller. Our personal favorite is the Big Island. It's, as its name suggests, quite large. So what we like to do, we didn't do it this last time, but I've done it twice before, especially if you only have 3 days and there's so much to cover. I personally like to fly into Hilo. The rental cars are cheaper out there. So you have 2 options, flying to the Big Island, Hilo and Kona. So I like to fly into Hilo, and that's where the rainforest is. So the Big Island has just about every ecosystem in the world covered. So I like to drive the perimeter around the island, and you get to see the change from rainforest to like just regular forest, it looks like the Pacific Northwest, to rolling hills covered in green grass to desert. It's really interesting and fascinating. There's a lot of hikes. It's a little bit less populated, so you get a lot more places that feel like they're just for you. Kauai is great if you're really interested in hiking and going to the beach. It's called the Garden Isle. So you're going to get a lot more of that local culture too. And then Maui is a little bit more built up for tourism. Of course, Haleakala is out there. It's one of the highest peaks in the world. So you can drive up to Haleakala. And then also the road to Hana is there. I have only been to Maui when there were less tourists, so just recently. And the road to Hana is very long, and I can only imagine what it's like when there are other people on that road. A little bit scary for me. It's very tiny and winding, but it's beautiful nonetheless. Maui's gorgeous and probably our favorite place for beaches. So if you just want to lay out on the beach and you want flat, sandy beaches, definitely go to Maui.
How is the cost of living?
Expensive. So we're fortunate here, like I said before, my husband is in the military, so we do get rent covered, but rent even out in the suburbs is just as expensive as it is in Boston, just to give you a frame of reference. So, and it's steadily rising, which is a little bit unfortunate, pushing some locals to move off the island. So it is pricey, and even going to the grocery store, I have paid, if I'm going to a local grocery store, I've paid up to $8 for like a gallon of milk. So it's pretty pricey out here, and hopefully there's some solutions to that so locals can stay where they were born. But it's expensive. That's I'll leave that at.
And then it just looks like we have a couple other recommendations from folks. So
Sure.
Lisa's family was in Oahu in January 2020, so right before COVID,
Nice.
and put in a link for a tour group. And then
Awesome.
Dale mentioned visiting Pearl Harbor and thought that it was a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, Pearl Harbor is a great experience. They did finally reopen the actual Arizona Memorial, but they do have a lot of things closed still because of COVID. They haven't had the fundings or the justification yet to keep them open. So that's the only note I'm saying. If you're coming in the next couple of weeks, I would just keep that in mind.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for giving us a little piece of paradise in from wherever we are all joining from. It's been really wonderful to hear you share your recommendations and favorites. And thank you all for joining us today. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining me on my virtual tour of Oahu.